this morning for you, the awakening to the mood of the mind is so very helpful. And how quickly the thinking mind starts to create a self and others and the time and the past and the future, and the whole world is born into consciousness through thought, through self, through mood. And you can know that as an object. And when you do, you start to touch the silence that's sort of behind the world in that way. So what is the mood of the mind? And this isn't a judgment, is it? It's an awakening. And then tuning into silence by listening to whatever sounds are there. And in the listening, you also hear the silence, don't you? Because you're tuned into the present moment. You know the way things are. It's very simple, isn't it? It's the complexity is the habits of thought and becoming and all the rest of it. But the awakening is very, very simple. And then creating affection in consciousness, this is a really pleasant thing to do. So making conscious someone dear to you, visualizing, naming them, bringing them at the in-breath, feeling the heart. May they be well. It's quite a lovely thing to do, isn't it? It's like a giving. And then you keep tuning into that, to the silence, to the affection, to the gratitude. So a lot of questions came in. One was back to that thing about social responsibility and what you can do. And the correspondent said, yeah, but old people can do a lot. They can vote, and certainly I totally agree with that. But I would say protect the mind from anger and righteous indignation, because, you know, like this person said, it feels like the 1930s and the kind of sink into fascism and so on. And yeah, it can be very frightening, but we are cultivating something which is deeper than all of that, and it just depends on what you're interested in. You know, if you're really interested in getting angry, okay, go for it. If that's what turns you on, as we say, and then be angry. But how profitable is that, right? And how effective is that? So one wants to guard against righteous indignation and the anger which is right, because that's also been very destructive in human society on all edges of the spectrum. So can one be engaged without being angry? Don't know, I'm a monk. I've done this, but is there some logic in being engaged without being angry? Does that kind of make sense? Or is anger a necessary part of being engaged? And is enragement a necessary part of effective action? And I don't know. I know that I tell the story when I was at U of T in mid-60s, and there was the anti-Vietnam War protests were going on, and you probably, many of you heard this story, but there was a radical left dissident called Jerry Rubin, part of the Chicago 7, for those who were around for the Chicago Convention in whenever it was, and Democratic Convention in Chicago. Well, the 7 guys who were arrested for sedition, and he was one of them, and he was on bail before the trial, and he came to U of T and spoke, probably Convocation Hall, and it was an anti-Vietnam War protest, and yeah, I was against that war, and he put this Viet Cong flag around his shoulders, and he incited everyone to extreme anger. And I said, yeah, but I don't want to be like that. And yeah, sure, it's maybe what you're saying is right in some kind of way, but do I want to become angry and self-righteous or whatever? I heard that later he became a stockbroker. Or one of those guys. I said, oh yeah, that's the transformation. Nothing against stockbrokers. So anyway, I just thought in my own life, I thought I'd rather cultivate inner freedom and try to participate in wherever I participate from that. If I was in fascist Italy, 1935, what would I don't know what I'd do. I don't know what I would do if I was in. Yeah, but anyway, these are the choices I had. So we all have choices because we're very fortunate to be here. So my question isn't so much how much you engage in social activism. My question is, does anger serve peace? Let's say, does an angry person serve peace in the world? Or maybe you think, well, peace, just like being a monk and being peaceful in that way is not really going to stop the downward trend of societal corruptions and so on. Yeah. So you have to, in an ideal situation, the social activism becomes your vocation. And vocation always had that idea of God-given. And so monasticism is a vocation, family is a vocation, social activism could be a vocation. So for someone like Dr. King and Nelson Mandela again, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, they're socially activist, and that's their vocation. But it's also their spiritual challenge to remain loving in situations which are horrible, very, very horrible. Now, so did Nelson Mandela have any effect on the world from his profound ability to forgive? He did. Does His Holiness the Dalai Lama? He does. Can he stop the Chinese from doing what they, what has happened to the Tibetan people? No. Right? Dr. King got killed. He got assassinated. Right? So can you do social activism and also use it to take responsibility for anger? And that would be an interesting one. So that the vehicle is, let's say, whatever issue you want to be involved in, global warming or racial injustice. Okay, you choose something that you might have some power and effect in because you have that relationship in society and you have the resources, you need the resources. And then you use that to understand anger and liberate your heart from anger. And that would be like social activism as a spiritual practice. Rather than, because it's just too easy to blame your anger on other people, isn't it? It's really easy to do. I mean, I can find lots of things in the world I can hate, but where's the? It's like Toni Morrison saying that goodness is difficult. It's not easy to do activism and do it as a spiritual practice. So that's not easy to do, but it's an interesting challenge. So. Whatever you choose, I've chosen this, you choose what you want to choose, but can it be a way of always being responsible for your own mind and from your own heart and always moving towards compassion? That would be a kind of Buddhist ideal. It's hard to do, yeah. I mean, and who am I to talk? I became a monk. But I didn't become a monk to run away from social responsibility. I just knew I had to do training. I needed to do the undergraduate work of the mind. And then things have evolved, so I'm here now. So that's it. How do you address that? Each of us addresses that in our own way. But one thing I think to discern or to distinguish in Buddhism is the difference between hatred and anger. So hatred to me seems very pernicious, very destructive, and it's a really held position of the other who deserves my hatred, right? And that's very, very destructive for the individual and society. Anger is also, I mean, it can be problematic, but it's much, it's socially awkward to have people angry all the time, to say the least. Or it can certainly be very painful because anger oftentimes goes out to the people closest to us, and that's very tragic, right? So anger has to be addressed too. But to me, there is a massive difference between held, visceral hatred of whatever, a group, as opposed to just the flare-up of anger and the habit of anger. And maybe just to recollect that story, which many of you I've told on retreats, of Sister Chittapala, who's the Cambodian nun in Amaravati, I think. Bodhipala. Who's Chittapala? She's the German. I always get those. There's the Chittapala and the Bodhipala, the two of our nuns. So Sister Bodhipala is the Cambodian nun, and she's probably a bit older than me, right? 80-ish? Yeah. Probably 80-ish in age, just a bit older than me. And she was in Vietnam when the Khmer Rouge took over, and she saw the violent, horrible death of many people in her family. And she fled Cambodia and ended up in the States. And she had a pretty good career. Was it in IT, or do you remember? I think she was a mathematician or something. Anyway, those parts I don't quite remember, but she did okay. But in the back of her mind was this huge hatred for the Khmer Rouge, justified. And she developed a practice of visually torturing Vietnamese Khmer Rouge soldiers. And then what I remember, I mean, she told me this many years ago, but she would imagine a soldier, and she would have a razor and cut them up into smallest possible pieces to inflict the most amount of pain possible to them. Constantly doing that. Now, you could say, yeah, I can understand that, but that's destroying you. And then she began to see that. She began to go back to her Buddhist roots. And then she really started to work on that and work on metta bhavana and develop a heart of forgiveness very sincerely. It took a long time. Eventually, she made her way back to Phnom Penh, and she set up a refuge for abused women in Phnom Penh. And all the time now, there's this transformation from hatred to forgiveness. And then this is the most stunning part of this. She decided that she wanted to go up to one of the villages, which was now neutralized, but she knew Khmer soldiers were in that area a lot. And although it was neutralized by the government now, she wanted to go up there to ask for forgiveness for all the hatred that she had had thrown at them, as it were. So she went out there and found some ex-Khmer soldiers and asked for forgiveness, and they cried. And wow, what a human being can, the transformation a human being can make. And yet you could say, the hatred is you could understand it, but it's just self-destructive more than that. And anyone around her, of course, would feel that. And now she's a lovely nun in Amaravati, and I think she can still flare up, right? You know, not often. Okay, but you know, you could see how, you know, you could get the answer is not often, but you could see how someone could still flare up, but there wouldn't be hatred, right? It's just you know, aggravation about something in life, and that's different. That's different. So we need to protect ourselves from that. And now forgiveness is not condoning. It's just not allowing the mind to go to hatred, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. You know, he doesn't hate, but he understands the situation, and he's not naive in that way. And then, well, anger, then that's very habitual, very passionate. Some people are very, very passionate that way, and anger is a very quickly volcanic arising. So they have to just very patiently work on not believing in it, not going there, having body awareness, asking for forgiveness, mea culpa, that kind of a thing. But it is different, right? It is different than hatred. And there's so much of that now, that divisions and through news and so on. So one has to be careful not to kind of buy into that. And another question was around how do you, this is completely different, change modes from social to transcendent. How do you hang out more in the silence at the end of thought, right? Because I think the person who's asking this question now has a taste of that. Yeah, I kind of tune into that a bit. Oh yeah, okay, I get it. I see what's being indicated. So then, for me, it would be noticing like in meditation especially, noticing the tendency to try to get rid of thought, and then making the end of thought something that you're very conscious of more and more. And in that moment of noticing, you somehow create a positive perception of, this is it, I don't have to go anywhere, as opposed to, oh God, I'm thinking too much. That shift from a critical judgment of thought, which isn't necessarily, you know, it's not that analytical, it's just this kind of reaction to thought and then moving to the object of meditation, but it's not coming from awakening. It's coming from resistance and rejection. It's very quick. It's very, very quick. And so to just make conscious the end of thought by doing the exercises we're doing, and they say, this is it. Kind of really affirming that and making that important. And then if you affirm that and you say, that's it, I don't have to do anything else, even just a little bit, then the next time it happens, you tend to affirm that and won't go into desire to get rid of thought. And you keep doing that. 20 years? So remember, this is very subtle. It's very, very subtle. But once you have the taste of that, you know, the kind of nectar of silence, then you will incline towards that. You will do that. But the old habits will be there. This is the frustrating part of the contemplative life, is even though you have insight, the power of habit overwhelms the insights that you have. And that's very frustrating. And yeah, this just the way it is. The part of this whole business is frustrating, which is okay. But then if you just keep remembering, and then like in situation like waiting is very good. You know, when you're waiting for the boss or the traffic jam or the dentist. Do people still go to dentists nowadays, or is that not allowed? It's allowed? Okay. You know, you're just waiting there, nothing to do. So then when there's nothing to do, you want to do something. So you pick up whatever magazine you like in the collection of magazines, or you know, you scroll through your emails, or you do something, right? Well, why don't you do nothing? You know, there's nothing to do. Why do anything? So then you just abide in a witnessing. You sit there and witness. But you notice the mind wants to do something, and that's the movement of thought, really, and of becoming and doing. It's okay, you know, it might be an interesting magazine, and you could answer your emails. So, but just like, oh, well, there's nothing to do, and then listen to the silence. You can take those little opportunities that do exist in life, and obviously, the more you introduce them into your 24 hours of a day, the more they'll become conscious. That silence will become conscious. So there is this huge habit of filling the mind, isn't there? And we've got really nice toys to fill the mind, or really horrible toys to fill the mind. You know, you can, but it is this constant going out, isn't it? And then consuming. So that's what a consumer society does. And we might not be consuming, you know, really gross material objects. So we are consuming information a lot. The mind does like to go out a lot. And the mind going outside, you know, that the way that Lompa Dun says, the mind going outside is the cause. The result of the mind going outside is suffering. The mind knowing the mind is the path. The result of the mind knowing the mind is the end of suffering. You know the mind, you know knowing. And you begin, so the more you intend that, the more it'll happen, really. But there's no, I don't know any, you know, secret, quick methods that would work. I tried drugs, that didn't work. That messed it up even more, so I don't recommend that. But a lifestyle which is non-distracting helps in that way. You know, a lifestyle which doesn't stir the mind so much, where that sense of silence becomes really, really more and more obvious. Okay. I've been finding the still knowing of very useful, experimenting with bringing up a worry, my style of fear, into the still knowing and abiding there. Also with discomfort in my knees, and seeing that the still knowing of the pain allows it to be as it is, less resistance. Wonder about experimenting with half-open eyes, as in the Zen tradition, to help transition it into life generally. This morning I meditated looking at the light forming in the trees in front of me, and worked with abiding with still knowing and bringing up worry, easier as it is beautiful here. I wonder if this might be a good method for me expanding the practice into the less beautiful parts of life. Yes, perfect. That's the kind of experimentation you want to do, right? Each of us has our own life program, as it were, that we're working with, both in terms of conditioning and social situation. And then we get a feeling for, okay, this works, I like this, so how can I bring this into all of life? Because this should be 24/7, right? It couldn't be, if it's just a sort of Zafu experience, what's the point of it? And you feel even more depressed when you go back home, or whatever it might be. So the intuitions that make it something that are an everyday part of life are very important, very, very, very fruitful. And that kind of experimentation, because it's personal, it can be very effective, because it is about one's own situation, but the basic principles have been understood. So that's the kind of stuff, you know, monks do a lot. Like Ajahn Chah, he would say, always question yourself, but not just intellectually, but like in this kind of looking way. So yes, definitely. And again, like beauty helps, doesn't it? So like the Buddha said, the monks should live in forest environments. They shouldn't set up monasteries and pubs for some reason, right? And then, but, not that I'm going to a pub soon, but being in airports, you know, complex places, the practice has got to be the same. And if I'm so pathetic that I have to live in a monastery in a beautiful place and I can't go to a more raucous place, then, you know, what's going on? Am I just dependent on my environment? So the environment is incredibly helpful, but the practice should be in all environments. That only makes sense. Otherwise not transcendent, is it? When all else fails, another question, when all else fails in my meditation practice, I turn to metta. So I really appreciated your clarification of some of the words in the metta chant, such as humble and not conceited. However, when asked about sending metta to individuals, your answer suggested this is not the intention or method. It is about openness, oneness. Well, openness is what I used. It is about oneness and also knowing the feeling in the heart. I am paraphrasing here. I have been sending the energy of metta to individuals. Could you clarify the metta practice? Well, again, this is words, so kind of whatever works. But when I go to Home Depot and I'm looking at the lumber, I don't kind of just send metta to each person I go by. I just keep the heart open, right? And then if the heart contracts because of something, maybe because the person's looking at me like I'm an insect, then I say, oh, that's that, right? So that I never learned Buddhism this way, sending metta. I learned it more from Thailand, where it was a development of the paramita, the development of energy, the development of the heart. And so I'll use imagery like Lompa Samedo on the in-breath, may you be well on the out-breath. So you could say maybe that's sending, that's fine, but these are just verbal strategies, really. It's really, does it work for you? Don't worry so much about the language, but does it really work for you? And then people, like I think Milena asked, well, does it really affect someone across the oceans and so on? That's a speculative question, which is really not a good question, because what's the point? It's just another question that you could have an answer, yay or nay. And so what's the point? But the real effectiveness of this is the point, isn't it? So if my strategy doesn't work for you, but your strategy works for you, then sadhu, that's what's important, isn't it? And it is a beautiful thing that we human beings can enter into that way of relationship. But to me, it's simply, that's why I don't like in the lists, they say, well, you really have to spread metta to yourself. Yeah, kind of, sure. But to me, if there is self-disparagement, then the heart's closed. But if there's other disparagement, the heart's closed. So if I stay centered to the open heart, then when self-criticism starts to ramp up, which it doesn't so much anymore, then that's the heart closing. So it's not configured as I kind of sending metta to myself. It's more just. It's not on the energy of self and it's not on the, what is it? It's not in the model of self and other. The model of flow of consciousness is the model that's governed by dependent origination. With this as conditioned data arises, when this there's that. The model of the social part of Buddhism, what we call conventional truth, is a model of self and other. So I'm using the model of dependent origination. Where the sense of self and other is a perception that comes and goes, and I'm moving towards the emptiness of those perceptions with the open heart. But then in the conventional realm, that does it informs the way I'm in Home Depot. Because the heart knows the openness and it knows closedness. So it does inform my social life, but I'm not, the practice, the conceptual part of my practice isn't in that description. But I'm not saying that description is wrong, right? Because it's not like Buddhist fundamentalism or something. You have to do it this way and it's the only way to do it. But it's rather, Buddhists are very pragmatic. So, the bottom line for everyone is the truth that edifies is the truth for you, right? So if I say something to you doesn't work, it's not I'm wrong, not you're wrong, it just doesn't work. So you move on to something else. Huh? And then you're very kind of open about that. You know what axis mundi? It's awareness, right? It's the axis of the world. I have you know what a plumb bob is? Plumb bob. I have that hanging from my shelf, one of my shelves, it hangs down, and it's always in the center of the world. That's what awareness is. That's what the perennial philosophers were talking about. Fritjof Schumann and Kumar and all these people I used to read, right? So you find perennial philosophy in so many, Krishnamurti, Advaita Vedanta. If you look at Rumi, it's kind of like that, and they have a different language of talking about that. We talk about the awakened mind. Yeah, I used to read a lot in my old days. Okay, so a few more questions. Is there a reason or purpose of the accumulated pain in the legs and back of formerly sitting cross-legged? Well, the reason is probably one isn't used to sitting so many hours cross-legged. So if you were like, when I went to Thailand in this agricultural society, most of the houses had no furniture. Most of the farm, so the monks lived on the floor of their homes and living on the floor of their kutis. There was no furniture. There were no beds. There were no chairs. It was just, there were no cushions. You just had a little cloth, right? So if you grew up in that kind of environment and sitting cross-legged, it's just natural and there's not much pain. But if you're not used to sitting cross-legged, then obviously your muscles aren't developed for that, or maybe you're older, or maybe you've had, like I've had 2 arthroscopies on my knees and so all of that. So there's no, that's the reason, it's just the body's not in shape. So you can work towards getting the body in shape for sitting by talking to a good yoga teacher. And then in what's the purpose of, there's no purpose as such, but you can use it to learn how to be peaceful, coexist with pain, but not to the extent that it hurts you. This is not a good idea. But just to shift on every discomfort would make you restless. So what I suggest is, take care of your body, first of all. The older you get, remember, it's not about staying in shape. It's like keeping this thing on the road. And so you don't want to wreck your back or wreck your knees or whatever. But then if you can develop like a good cross-legged posture, it's very solid, it's very grounded, and you learn how to bring your spine tall and hold it tall. It's very, very good for meditation because it has a kind of good energy flow to it. And that takes some learning. If you've never really done that, then yeah, it's going to be a lot of discomfort. Then you have to figure out, okay, if I want to develop cross-legged posture, I'll do it for a while, but if I want to sit longer, maybe I'll do like half an hour on the floor, half an hour in a chair, and gently move into it rather than hurt yourself. And then learning how to be, say that the previous, also with discomfort in my knees, and seeing that the still knowing of the pain allows it to be as it is, less resistance. So that kind of learning where pain itself becomes a teacher around resistance. Having said that, one of the problems I know I had, that pain then brought up willfulness. So I was willfully trying to not move, very courageous, but not wise, right? Not wise, not reflecting on pain, just I'm not going to move. That wasn't really wisdom. I mean, I did learn, but in my discomfort in my knees and seeing that the still knowing of the pain allows it to be as it is, a less resistance. So there's obviously been a learning there around pain and how to be at peace with pain. And pain is just a big part of being incarnate in the body. So learning of people who have a chronic like arthritis or things like that, and who are meditators, they learn a lot about pain. They have really skillful means around being at peace with pain. But not to inflict it on yourself, obviously. So with pain in the sitting practice, the discomforts which are not harmful, and you know they're not harmful, you learn how to be at peace with unfulfilled desire, and that's the desire to move. And that settles the mind away from rest. Part of restlessness is physical pain and discomfort. And you get to know the difference between, like I know in my knees, there are certain pains, as soon as they come, I move. because I know if I don't, I'm going to be limping for the next hour. But there's other discomforts in my body, which I know that's just discomfort, and I use them just to peacefully abide with and look at desire and let go of desire and peacefully abide with that. So those are good learnings in meditation. Do you fear death? Well, not today. Tomorrow maybe, I don't know. But I think the question more, like, if they're going to take me to the gallows tomorrow, will I feel fear? I don't know. Probably, it's be a bit of concern. I'm going to chop my head off. I've been reading Hilary Mantel, sorry. But I don't think the question is, am I afraid of death? Because that's a very abstract statement right now. I think perhaps putting it better would be, can I abide at peace with fear? That would be more, to me, more a useful question, because fear comes up and manifests in all kinds of ways. It seems to me, if I understand fear and I've learned how to release a lot of fear, that if fear arises in some dying process, then the refuge is not in the emotion, but it's in the knowing. And then the fear can arise, stay for a while, and cease. Because why? Because I've trained in all kinds of social fears or whatever kinds of fears I've had. So that to me would be a more useful, rather than the abstract, because I don't know. I don't really know. Yeah. And then, the monks might be very disappointed, like, as I'm dying, oh, I'm so afraid. Vipassy, help me. Oh, he doesn't know anything, but maybe I do. Maybe I'm just afraid, but wow, I'm really afraid. This is fear. Fear feels this way. And who knows, right? Let me sprinkle water on me or something. Do monks always eat at these times? And so on. Our eating regimen is not moral. That's one thing you have to understand about monks' rules. That they're not all, very few of them are around morality. Most of them are around organizing monastic life and sticking to values of simplicity, renunciation, sense restraint. So sometimes, if you think these are moral rules, you think you're really wacky. but they're just ways of, like we don't get married, right? And marriage is not immoral, by the way. Whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, you can write to me. But you imagine if you had a community of 50 monks and they had families, that'd be different. It wouldn't be a monastery anymore, it'd be the commune, right? And there'd be different principles of organization. So it's simply that the Buddha suggested developing monastic life is very simple, renunciant, sense restraint, not having many distractions. So like we don't, each of us doesn't have a big CD collection or something like that. But music is not immoral, it can be actually spiritual, but it's just that would be another avenue to go out into the objects of the world. And the principle of monasticism is that it's the transcendence of the need for objects. And so simplicity really helps in that. So if a monk is restless and he has no avenues of distraction, then he has to look at the restlessness and he abides with it and he understands the kind of this kind of drawing out into objective experience. So people will kind of equate rules with morality. It's not that. It's like, you'll have rules in your home, which are just rules of the home. This is how we're going to live together. And if we all abide by it, then we'll live in harmony. If we don't, we have disharmony. When feeling lots of anxiety, fear, for example, if you contracted COVID-19, how can you meditate, especially with pain or not being able to breathe? Again, I don't know. I'll just know when I'm tested, right? So if what you do is you develop strength of awareness in the ordinary, in the safe situations, in the situation of kalyanamitta and friendship, called this retreat, right? And then from that, you gain some insight and some understanding. And then when life becomes more complex, you have some tools, some foundation, you have a kind of momentum of awareness and insight and all of that, which then serve you in the complexities. But you don't know. I don't know if I, like firstly, like if you're if you're absorbed into breath meditation and then you can't breathe, then that's going to be a challenge, right? But if awareness is your practice and you can't breathe and you panic, well, maybe awareness knows panic. I don't know, right? I mean, I won't. I can't tell you now. Maybe when I pass away, I'll send you a rainbow or something and tell you how it went. But these are kind of speculative questions which can't be answered. But what you can answer is what can you do now to prepare for death, for sickness, and for pain, is to be aware now of little pains, little annoyances, or if they're big, then that too. So so it's there's a lot we just don't know. We don't know. The future's unknown. Now is the knowing. As I rest, this is another question. As I rest more in knowing and try and bring that to my daily life, there seems to be a lessening of will, motivation for what were my usual activities. I do what needs to be done and try to bring the knowing mind to that, but there certainly seems to be a dropping away of motivation in many areas. Well, this is very common, nibbida, the kind of sense of it's that basic sense of that going out into objects is no longer really that interesting or even needy. One doesn't need to do that, and one rests and abides in the beauty of the peace of the mind. But that doesn't, and it's not passive in some kind of dysfunctional sense. Not that. It's not even passive. It's actually very awake. It's very awake, and it's actually a skill, I would say, the skill of being abiding in non-desire, in non-becoming, in non-resistance, abiding as that more and more. And that's very fulfilling. And yet, when there's need, instantly we can respond, and we will respond instantly. There's no hesitation. There's no need to hesitate. So this is I would say, this is a good sign. Society might not say that. Society says, oh, you're losing the plot here. It's not depression. It's not passivity, because depression would be with a lot of thinking. This is not with a lot of thinking. This is with abiding in stillness and peace. And because it is so fulfilling, and because it has that fulfillment of non-desire rather than desire. The thing about desires being fulfilled is they perpetuate more desires. Whereas with the cessation of desire, you no longer need to fulfill desires, right? You have biological desires, you have social desires of what you'd like to affect with your family and friends and so on. But as the need for objects falls away, the taste of peace is actually much more pleasant and much more interesting than the taste of movement and excitement and interest. So you become kind of interested in peace, I suppose. So these are, and this is not, like in conventional society, you might think, oh, this is not a good thing. Where passivity gets bad is when it goes to thought. And then thought just spins around in some kind of self-narratives of depression and downward spirals of depression, right? But this is not that. This is actually the brightness of being, brightness of being. So I would say savor that, yeah. And then you also find that abiding as that, then there come opportunities to be able to share that, which is delightful, right? Being able to share that, both in the way a person is or in the language of sharing. But many people won't understand that. Many people will think it's too passive for them, or they want to be more active. Fair enough. Awakening to the way things are. Simple, isn't it? And then thought makes it complex. So come to the simplicity of knowing. And then what language do you use to stay there? Like what I was just saying earlier, this is it. This is the goal, this knowing. And then you can create something pleasant, affection of some way in the heart, welcoming. The end of the out-breath, curiosity. So whether it's affection or curiosity, both are aspects of awakened knowing. They're not, curiosity, you're not trying to get an experience. You're looking at your experience right now, like say the end of the out-breath, just as a scientist in a lab is looking at certain procedures. But then the affection is one of a warmth and an attitude which really helps you sustain this capacity for awareness. So those are kind of general principles, and somehow you need to either agree with them or disagree with them, but then if you find them helpful, how would you keep introducing those simple principles into the way you meditate? That's not a technique, is it? Okay, so it's our final evening. So, as I always joke, if it was a terrible retreat and you're happy, I'm out of here, off to the races, except the races are closed. And if it was a good retreat, then you feel sad, or if it was in a different retreat, you feel indifferent, whatever. Time is feeling, isn't it? Interesting that. Time isn't just some kind of, it is, I suppose, scientifically some kind of absolute, but even then they argue, I think. But time is a felt thing. You feel like if your meditation went really well, it was a quick meditation, and if it was horrible, it was eternal hell, or whatever. So, but whatever you feel now, whether happy, sad, or in between, or the awareness is timeless, isn't it? This is the mystery of awareness, or knowing, or whatever words you like to use for that. Consciousness, presence, so many ways that spiritual traditions talk about this ineffable sense of presence and knowing. You know that you know. It has no quality. It knows qualities, yeah? And it has no shape. You know, it's not square or round. It doesn't have a haircut. And it's really the mystery. And yet, you can abide as the knowing. It's not mysterious in the sense that it's hidden in any way. Whereas qualities like a sadness at the end of a retreat, or happiness at the end, the sitting is finally ended, or these are the qualities that we experience, and we have to respond to them because we are, we're biological beings and emotional beings, but is that the only thing there is? An endless response to stimuli, pain and pleasure, and trying to get the whole business right. Well, the Buddha says no, there is a kind of third alternative to pleasure and pain, and that's the transcendent silence of knowing the way things are. And just to get a taste of that, just listening to sound and just starting to intuit that. Lompo Samedo published a book some years ago in intuitive awareness, and I didn't pick up on that word in the beginning. And then I said, how do you explain this? If you have a kind of rigorous intellectual approach, then language has the specific meaning. This means this, and that means that, and this means this, and so on and so forth. And which maybe it's true, but a lot of these things the Buddha used analogy or metaphor or allegory, things that, and the idea of a reflective teaching, it's not like you nail down the exact word which means the exact thing. The word simply is just trying to get you to look at life in a certain way so you understand something about it. And that to me is it's cumulative. The sense of what is appropriate and what is liberating and what non-attachment is and so on is a kind of cumulative wisdom from the sense of reflection, so that one becomes less and less confused by conditions, less and less. Well, it's confidence, isn't it? It's a confidence that is not. It's not a confidence that's based in some kind of Buddhist fundamentalism. That's intellectualism. And okay, you're confident about some ideas, but that doesn't. To me, that's simply still kind of head stuff, intellectual stuff, and that might be very helpful. But the confidence existentially, emotionally, to know what the path is, that to me is what Luang Por Sumedho is talking about, intuitive awareness. You just intuit, and that's the way to go, yeah. So, some of the questions people ask, like what is witnessing and what is consciousness and what is not, those kinds of questions. So I always just say, do you get it? And then if they don't, then I just use a whole bunch of other words until maybe I can say, okay. So it's probably my fault, not anyone's fault, but it's just language and the structures of language and our own ways we interpret life and so on. So the awakened mind is such a simple thing. Like now the phrase that everyone uses, we live in kind of times do we live in? Interesting or unreal or we live in uncertain times. There you go, right? Is that I'm just when haven't we lived in uncertain times, right? It's kind of really weird uncertain right now, but what is certain is that it feels uncertain. And that's the only liberation from uncertainty, is it feels uncertain. And that's not a tautology. You could say, oh, of course. But actually it's a practice. It's a practice. And this was the way Ajahn Chah did it. He constantly banged away at that theme. It's uncertain. If you take it in a social context, it's uncertain. You can get really afraid. Right? If you ran with uncertainty as worry, and you took all the scenarios of global warming and pandemic and political strife and refugees, and you really proliferate on that, not only would you feel uncertain, but you'd need tranquilizers. You'd be very worried. But that's not what Luang Por Sah's chasing. Don't worry. No, look at the feeling of worry as something which is coming and going. Look at the feeling of certainty, which is coming and going. Look at the feeling of time coming and going. So and this is the whole practice of Buddhism, is what we call anicca sanya, perception of change. And that's always possible, isn't it? You can feel like after this retreat, maybe you feel inspired now, I don't know. Maybe you want your money back, but fortunately we didn't charge anything. but whatever you feel, right? And then 2 weeks down the road, you think, what the heck was he talking about? You can just say to yourself, I don't know what he was talking about. And you're on the path again. You can read a book too if you want. But this is the beauty of it. It's always there. It's always a possibility. And I think the issue is not so much that we don't understand that. The issue is trust. And I always ask that of people, don't I? I say, what do you trust in your spiritual life? Well, morality, great. Yeah. And my coffee machine, okay, good. This is good. or whatever. But what do you actually trust spiritually? What do you have faith in? Do you have faith in dogma? Well, most of us don't. Most of us are we're too clever for that, I think. So, any kind of religious fundamentalism always, go away. We don't like that because we feel it's not spiritual, it's conceited or aggressive or patronizing, whatever it is. But trust is something, isn't it? And faith is something, right? Well, you could say you have faith in material things like the brakes of your car and your insurance broker or something like that. But what is the spiritual life, and what does trust and faith mean? And I think that's an important question to put to yourself and ponder, because that will be what happens when life changes, as it changes in different ways. So if I trust and worry, now you might not put it that way. You might not put it that I trust and worry, but when push comes to shove, what do you do? Right? What do you do? Well, my go-to place is worry. So there's a faith in worry, or a trust in worry, or a habit of worry, or the karma worry, whatever word you want to use. So I think one needs to make conscious the intention to trust in awareness, if this makes sense to you, if this practice makes sense to you. And I think you have to do that very consciously and deliberately, because the other parts of our habitual conditioning click in so very, very quickly. And hopefully this kind of a retreat, because it's safe and it's wholesome, and we've got time. Thank you, COVID. We've got a chance to do this, that you can develop a sensitivity to awareness of the way things are. And then when you feel vulnerable in situations which are not dangerous, when you feel vulnerable and your fears start to come up or worries start to come up, you can begin to trust and awareness of vulnerability rather than running with the thoughts of worry and all the rest of it that fear does to us. And that's what fear does. And a lot of the popular press is very, very, very stimulating lots of fear in our minds. And sure, the things to be afraid of, but the sense of being vulnerable, I think, is a very important human condition to begin to make conscious in a safe place. I'm not saying you go out, into the forest and hug the bear, as it were. You have a safe place, but it's, there's some charge to it. It's very, very helpful, very helpful. And of course, that's the way there was a question from someone about the ascetic practices that monks do. Were they helpful? Well, I could fast for 10 days with just water, or I could do without sleep, and I kind of did all that stuff. But so what? Because that was all willpower. So I could will myself to do things. But what was really ascetic for me was vulnerability. That was the ascetic practice, being in places where I did not feel comfortable, but that were safe. And then in those vulnerable places, the ego mind would really come up. In fear or worry or self-doubt or wanting people to like me. And then, I'd want someone to like me, and they looked at me like I was a grapefruit, and then I'd worry about them. And then I realized they had the flu, it wasn't about me, and all the proliferation of mind that takes place with vulnerability and the self-doubt and all that. And that's a huge part of our suffering, isn't it? It's a huge part of our suffering. And so how do you liberate the mind from that? Well, a lot of people do it by developing skills. Okay, that's a good way. You develop some skills, you can do things in the world. But sometimes those skills are a cover-up, aren't they? You find people who, you can see that this person is quite powerful, but they're very vulnerable. And so, like the sense of not knowing and not being sure, not the future, those are things that we need to deal with functionally, sure, okay, but emotionally, to bear witness to vulnerability is the way to liberate fear from the heart in a safe environment with enough awareness. I'm assuming all this. If a person has like really heavy PTSD, then that's a whole different professional thing to deal with. But you and I, with our average garden variety neuroses and vulnerabilities, this makes a lot of sense. Certainly I found that. I really found that. So why I'm saying this is because I just got an email. There's a thing, where's this guy coming from anyway? And this is about self-acceptance. And I find with a lot of our culture, I don't know about Indian culture or Singaporean culture or Thai culture, but the folk that I hang out with, there's a lot of self-disparagement, a lot of self-criticism, a lot of idealism, and the sense of self is then created from ideals that have been inculcated into the mind, conditioned into the mind, whether it's around being a man or being a woman or being a mom or being a dad or being all this kind of stuff, shoulds and shouldn'ts. And then from that idealism, there's a lot of self-criticism and guilt and lack of self-acceptance. And, you kind of know what I mean. and that's a big way that attachment takes place in our cultures. And we can be very smart. We can read all the books you want about this and be very, very clever. But this is an issue. Isn't an issue of intellect. This is an issue of the heart, isn't it? Right? And somehow all the intellectualism kind of, that's not where it's at for me. It's at my heart. So that's why maybe I talk a lot about the heart, somehow bypassing the endless analysis to get to the root of the problem, which is both a visceral, conditioned result in the heart. At least I find that. So this is a neat reading. This comes from a book called The Velveteen Rabbit, written in 1922 by Marjorie Williams. Now this is a book for children. Not that I think you're childlike, but and this book takes place in the child's playroom, and these are the toys talking to each other. Okay, you got it? Stage is set. And it's about love and self-acceptance. So this is the skin horse now, the skin horse speaking. Real isn't how you were made, said the skin horse. It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. Does it hurt? Asked the rabbit. Sometimes, said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. When you are real, you don't mind being hurt. Does it happen all at once, like being wound up? He asked, or bit by bit? It doesn't happen all at once, said the skin horse. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't often happen to people who break easily or have sharp edges or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off and your eyes drop out and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly except to people who don't understand. So as I noticed that some of us have gray hair, I didn't see anyone's eyeballs falling out during this retreat. Now that can sound very sentimental, but the sentiment is important, because some of the tone of Buddhism and meditation is very kind of, climb the mountain, conquer the, maybe it's very male that way, kind of kill the dragon or whatever you have. But is that really, does that work? Because it can be very much imbued with willfulness and becoming. Whereas like when you feel vulnerable, and fears are coming up, and it is safe. I keep emphasizing that. Isn't that the opportunity to see, to witness the way things are? And what happens there What happens there? Well, that kind of witnessing of vulnerability is a kind of self-loving, because now you're no longer rejecting that. You're not pushing it away and demanding that you be whatever you should be. And in that willingness, and this willingness, I would say, is what Metta Bhavana is about. Not just a kind of dualistic sending out metta to friends we love, that's fine, but this is again, a more profound idea around Metta Bhavana, not dwelling in aversion, goodwill, say. Goodwill to a feeling of vulnerability. You get what I mean? An ability to, like Lompa Samedos, it all belongs, or open-hearted acceptance of the way things are. So it's not like a narcissistic loving, but you want to make what Metta Bhavana means to be really profound. And it seems to me that awareness and goodwill must be conjoined. I don't really see them as that different. Not like you do one and then you do the other. And I think the whole path is really one in that way. We use language and compartmentalize things like that, but in effect, as I was saying the other day, it is not the open heart simply a dynamic availability to all of life, which then responds to all of life according to the circumstances. So if there's pain, there's compassion. If there's beauty, there's joy. But because the heart is, and I spoke about this last time, but it's a very good way to think about it, and because the heart is fulfilled there's no desire. And because there's no desire, there's peacefulness, there's equanimity. But the equanimity isn't cold. It has this kind of openness. And how do we come to that? It seems to me in those areas of vulnerability, very important. Areas of uncertainty where you don't know. So without still pay for your insurance bills and make sure you got food in the fridge for the flood that's coming, and all the rest of it. So, like, as they say in one tradition, trust in Allah and tie your camel. So, having tied your camel, you want to be able to really enter into those difficult states of consciousness, because that's where the sense of self and distraction and blame, all that's where it gets born from. That's where it arises from. And yet in the witnessing of that and the allowing of that, that's where the separation of ego consciousness begins to fall away, and the union of love or compassion begins to really manifest. And you don't do it like a deliberate thing. It's more like it's the naturalness of the heart, which is liberated from fear, from greed, hatred, and delusion. It's just nature. It's nature. It's not like you have to do it. Like the Dalai Lama, I don't think he's doing it. He just is it, right? He doesn't kind of think, I think I'll do some Metta Bhavana today. The mind is just it. Bodhisattva. The reason I speak about this, because a lot of my suffering has been that sense of vulnerability and like teaching is, you're really out there. Anyone who's taught, you're just naked. I don't do seal practice on the stage, but you are naked and emotionally. You're just there. You're really raw, and then you don't have a text, and you got no backup guy, and so then you feel. At least me. I know some people. I don't think Ajahn Viradhammo has ever felt vulnerable. He's a different species to me. But I found that was actually the best ascetic practice I could have. Being vulnerable, but being safe. Feeling doubt, feeling self-doubt, feeling fear, and not just riding it over by some preparation of text, but actually being in the midst of that, and then bearing witness to that, and then seeing what kindness is, and then that was incredibly powerful over a long period of time. And then the calmness comes naturally. The openness comes very naturally, but as long as there's these these things haunting our minds, that we're always going to be, wanting to free ourselves from that. So if you look at meditation as an accumulation of calming states of mind, great, that's very, very helpful. But also a meditation, not just light, meditation as a purification, as a willingness to bear witness to the arising of difficult states of mind, and then the cultivation of open-hearted awareness around that. These are powerful, powerful things to do. And their energy is not trivial. It's not just a kind of little blip in consciousness. It's powerful stuff, isn't it? And that's called vipaka karma. That's our karma. These resultant things that come through us. Why? Who cares? Maybe you know why. I don't know why. But it certainly is there. So the why somehow can be helpful, but a lot of times it's not important. You have enough sensibility, you know that here it comes. This is what it feels like. And the more you can witness that, I think the more the freedom becomes apparent. So that's not an issue of control, is it? For me, it's an issue of awakening. Now, if the heart trembles too much and is too shaken, then you just get distracted. So you need to somehow learn how to calm the mind, okay, and how to settle the mind down, and to get in environments where you're not vulnerable, and where you are on your own, and you have all the things which make you comfortable, but you don't want meditation to become this kind of precious experience. Leave me alone, I'm meditating. I'm precious now, you coarse thing. You don't want to go there, because that's not freedom, that's boring. Oh, Mama's being precious now. But that's not the spirit of it. So you find places of calm, and places in your own mind and in your own environment. But then you kind of, as you enter into the complexity, see, well, what is it that doesn't change? So at the end of a retreat, it's always important to kind of let go of everything. Like if you think now, I might lose this piece tomorrow, you're right. I guarantee it. Right? So rather than say, oh, I'm going to lose this piece now, well, okay, it's supposed to be that way. Right? So there isn't this kind of precious, monks get that way sometimes, like, leave me alone, I'm meditating. I'm your brother. I'm not the devil. No, I'm meditating, leave me alone. Right? I'm doing metta bhavana. We get that all the time. That's the funny one, when someone's doing metta bhavana and they get angry because you close the door too loud. I used to do that. Right. But is that what it's about? Is it like this precious, precious state of mind that you hold on to? I'm being a bit facetious, I hope. My community they're not going to feed me tomorrow. But I speak like this because I've been there, right? Kind of precious Viradhammo right now. But that's not freedom. That's not what it's about. So if the mind has become calm, right, great. And get good at that. Get good at that if you can. But realize if it's circumstantial, it's not freedom. And awakening to the way things are is not a circumstance. It's not about good weather or bad weather, right? It's transcendent. It's transcendent. And so, back to what I said, what do you trust in? What do you trust when push comes to shove and the volcano starts to erupt? What do you trust in? And if you can trust in awareness, then you've got the kind of pathway. Now, on the Malaysian retreat, which we finished a few days ago, about 2 weeks ago, I suppose, I suggested homework, so I will suggest the same homework to you. Pencil and paper. Well, the homework is actually very, very simple. To spend a year looking at resistance. What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Well, it's like this. and then resistance will arise, which is called vibhava tanha, if you take the Pali. Now, if you did that for a year, and this is I think this is the methodology of deepening Dharma practice. It's not just, just kind of going through the language, but taking one little bit of it and like really applying it. And you can see if you just did that for a year, constantly, because there's a lot of resistance that we have to the way things are. Physical pain, someone in the family, our own emotional states, the state of the union, whatever you want, right? There's a lot of resistance. That's not wrong, but if I don't understand resistance and I'm constantly reacting to or through it, then I haven't understood the one of the three types of craving, vibhava tanha. So if you come back to the texts, there are three kinds of craving. One of them is vibhava tanha, which is the desire to get rid of, which I just call resistance. So what if you did that? What if you kind of on your fridge or wherever you write things and on your desk, and you just put resistance as a kind of mirror? Then I think, if you're sincere about this, every time you tend to resist something in your own heart, or someone's talking to you and you say, "Oh, shut up," that's what resistance feels like. So you've gotten behind the reactivity to the mind state. And knowing resistance doesn't mean that you condone things or you don't disagree with people. It's not that. It's not the way you engage socially. It's the way you react inwardly, right? So you take a little chunk like that. You could use the word non-resistance and then watch resistance. And you just keep watching that. And that's what we call Dhamma Vijaya, investigation of Dharma. It's not a whole lot of analytical thinking, but it comes from the Four Noble Truths, and that aspect, one of the aspects why we suffer. We don't see the resistance, and then we kind of react through it. So, trying to get rid of thought, trying to get rid of an emotional state to get another state, that's all resistance. And once you awaken to resistance as an object, you're starting to let go of craving the way things are. Resistance has a biological necessity, so your leg hurts, then move, fine. But you're understanding resistance, so it's neither saying it's right nor wrong. I know that sounds like a weird bit of homework for a year, and you think you'll probably finish in a month, though. Good luck. But it's a way of looking at this teaching in a much more interesting way, rather than just always intellectualizing this stuff. You take, and if that doesn't suit you, really, you can just take anything, really, but just one little bit of your mind and consciousness and combining it with a teaching, and then working on it, understanding it, observing the mind, and that brings you a lot into awareness, doesn't it? Now you're looking at the way the mind works rather than just caught in the storylines. You're looking, how does that work? So the kind of like the ability to reflect on your own conscious experience gets better and better, more and more refined over time.